Silem stars, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then please subscribe down below and join the Silem stars. If you're not a Silem star, then you've definitely been missing out on a whole lot. Okay, in today's video I'm going to teach you guys how to make a side ruched dress from start to finish. Now this side ruched dress also has bishop sleeves. Okay, so I'm also going to teach you how to draft, cut and sew bishop sleeves as well. So if you want to see how to make this lovely side ruched dress with bishop sleeves, then definitely keep on watching.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there.
Now we're starting off with drafting a basic straight skirt. Now for the length of this skirt, I want it to be 42 inches. Okay, so that's what I'm just marking now. So I just went ahead to mark the baseline or the waist. I marked the hip. So from the waist, I marked 8 inches downwards, okay, to get the hip line. Now on the waist there, I'm just dividing her waist measurement by 4, marking that and adding 1.5 inches allowance. On the hip line, I also divided her hip measurement by 4, marked that and I added 1.5 inches allowance as well. Okay, so at the bottom part, I'm marking her hip measurement again. Okay, so at the hem, I marked her hip measurement and I added 1.5 inches. The reason why I marked her hip measurement at the bottom is because I want this to be a completely straight skirt and not a pencil skirt, just a straight skirt. This is because the ruching, if you make the skirt pencil, when you ruche it up, it's going to be difficult for the person to walk in the skirt. Okay, so from the hip, just draw a straight line down to meet at the hem, and also draw a straight line from the hip to the waist. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and just cut along that line. So this is the front piece done now. Now fold my fabric again to cut my back piece. So I'm just placing the front piece on top of the back piece and I'm just cutting that same outline. I made sure to leave 1.5 inches allowance for the zipper, okay, on the back piece. Okay, so that's just the main difference between the front piece and the back piece. That's the zipper allowance. Okay, this dress is not going to have any slits. Okay, now from the hip, I'm just going to go ahead and just cut along that fold, okay, to separate the back pieces. All right, and now from the hip downwards, I'm just reducing that allowance there. Okay, just because there's not going to be any slit, so I don't really need that bulk at the back. Now I'm just going to go ahead and just mark, you know, where I'm going to sew the back pieces together, okay, which is just where the fold of the front meets that zipper allowance of the back. And now I'm going to go ahead now to put in my darts. From the fold, I just marked 4 inches and then the length of my dart is 5 inches. Okay, so this 4 inches I marked for the width of the dart is simply the bust span divided by 2. The bust span is 8 inches divided by 2, that gave me 4 inches. Now I'm just replicating that same point on the back piece. Now I actually did not end up putting the darts on the front pieces of this skirt, and that's because I don't like the look of darts on the front part of the skirt. But if you want to put that, go ahead and do that. Now for the top part of this dress, I'm just marking the length of the dress, which is 16 inches, length of the top part of the dress rather, which is 16 inches. Okay, so the half length is 16 inches. Now from the baseline there, I'm just marking the armhole line 8 inches, and now I'm marking the bust point line 11 inches and under bust line 14 inches. Like I said, the half length of this is 16 inches. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead to just extend all those lines. Now on the armhole line, I just divided the bust circumference by 4, marked that, and I added 1.5 inches allowance to that. On the under bust line, I'm just marking her round under bust measurement divided by 4. I marked that and I also added 1.5 inches allowance to that. Now I'm just going to go ahead to just connect all those points, okay, all the way down to the half length point there. Now on the baseline there, I marked the shoulder divided by 2 and then I added just half inch allowance to that. Her shoulder is 14 inches divided by 2, that gave me 7 inches, and that's what I marked at the shoulder at the baseline there. Now I'm just drawing a curve from the shoulder to the armhole line to create the armhole, and I just went ahead to cut along, you know, that line. Now that I'm done drafting the front piece, okay, I'm just placing the front piece now on top of another piece of fabric to cut the back piece. I made sure to leave 1.5 inches for the zipper allowance, okay, for the back piece, but then I just cut the same outline, okay, of the front piece on the back piece. Now on the back piece, I marked that same armhole line. Now from that point all the way down to the half line, I just drew a slanted line. Now that will remove zipper bulge. For the neck, the width is 3.5 inches and the depth is 3 inches for the front. But for the back, the width is the same, okay, with the front 3.5 inches, but the depth for the back is 2 inches. So I just drew curves to create the neckline for both the front piece and the back piece, and I'm just cutting them. I also slanted my shoulder as well, okay, and then I'm cutting open that zipper allowance. Now the first thing I'm doing when it comes to sewing is I'm joining the two back pieces of the skirt together, okay. So I just joined both of them together along that line that I had marked. Now I'm also going to go ahead to join the two back pieces of the front of the top together, okay. So I've joined the two back pieces of the skirts and now I'm joining the two back pieces of the top, and this is what it looks like, okay. Now I just realized I forgot to mark the darts for the top part, so that's what I'm going to do now. So from the fold there, this is the front piece of the top part. From the fold I marked the same 4 inches, okay. So that same darts that I marked for the skirt part is what I'm marking for the top part as well. So from the fold, 4 inches, which is, like I said, is the bust span divided by 2, okay. And then for the front piece, the dart goes all the way up to the under bust point, okay, all the way up to the under bust line rather. Okay, so those are my two darts for the front. Now for the back piece, from the shoulder there all the way down to the where we have the armhole line, which is 8 inches, that's where my dart is going to start. So my dart starts from 8 inches from the top, okay, and goes all the way down to the half length. Now for the width of the dart, from that joining that I made for the two back pieces, I'm just marking that same 4 inches, okay. So from that joining, that allowance joining, it's 4 inches, okay, and then it's going to continue like that all the way down. So that's where I'm going to put my darts. So now I'm just going to go ahead now to sew the darts for all the pieces. I sewed the darts for the top part and for the bottom part as well, okay. Now after doing that, this is what we have, okay. Now I'm just taking the front piece of the top and then placing it right sides facing with the front piece of the skirts, okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and join them, okay, right sides facing like that with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now for the back pieces of the top and for the skirts, I'm just going to go ahead to just loosen up that seam. Now after loosening a bit of that seam, I'm just going to go ahead and pin one side of the back piece with one side of the skirt piece, okay, and I'll do the same thing with the other side as well. So I can sew one side and sew the other side as well, okay. Now after doing that, this is what we have. Now I'm placing the front piece on top of the back piece. So now we have one front piece and one back piece, okay. So now I'm just placing them right sides facing, and I'm just going to go ahead to just pin the shoulders, pin the bust area, the waist, the hip, everywhere, so that it stays put while I sew. Now before I sew, I'm going to go ahead now to mark her actual measurements. So I divided her bust measurement by 2, mark that where we have the bust area, and then I also divided her waist measurement by 2. I marked that at the waist of the dress, and then at the hip I divided her hip measurement by 2 as well, and I also marked that where we have the hip. I also went ahead to connect, those points together. So I'm just I'm going ahead now, like I said, to connect the points together. And now from the hip, I'm just marking a straight line all the way down, okay. Like I said, don't try to make this a pencil skirt. If you do, it's going to be difficult for the person to walk in this dress when it is ruched up, okay. You just draw a straight line all the way to the bottom. Now for the shoulders, I'm also marking where I'm going to join the shoulders. I'm just marking 1/2 inch from the edge. So I'm just joining this with 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm also going to go ahead and just sew the sides as well. Now after sewing all of that, this is what we have. Now I'm just going to go ahead and just mark the midpoint of this dress there around the shoulder. Guys, I'm stammering. And now I'm just marking the shoulder. So at one side I marked 0 inch, the zero inch mark, and on the other side I marked this 14 inches mark because her shoulder is 14 inches. And then I made sure to place that 7 inch at that midpoint that I marked. Now from the shoulder there downwards, I'm just marking 8 inches, okay, on both sides, and that will help me create my armhole. All right, now I'm just drawing a curve from that shoulder point I marked all the way down to the 8 inch mark. Okay, so that curve there creates my armhole, and now I'm going ahead to just cut along those curves. Now once you've cut this for both front and the back, you want to go in again and cut the front piece with about 1/4 inch. You just cut about 1/4 inch off the front piece. Now this gives a better fitting and then helps to avoid that bulginess around the bust area. Now moving on to our sleeve. The length of my sleeve I want it to be is 26 inches, but the actual long sleeve length is 23 inches. So I just added 3 inches to that. Since this is a bishop sleeve, you want it to be a bit longer so that when you put the elastic, it's not too short. I just drew the curve for the armhole there, and then I just marked her round sleeve divided by 2 where we have that curve, and then the width of this bishop sleeve at the hem is 15 inches while folded. So it means when it's unfolded, it's going to be 30 inches wide. So you can see that's a very wide sleeve. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and just cut that. Okay, make sure to put the actual round sleeve measurements at the top part of the curve so that you have a better fitting. Okay, so I cut my 2 sleeves together, so I'm just separating them now so we can work with one at a time. Now I'm going to go ahead and just weave the hem of this sleeve and then fold it and then sew it down. I'm folding with about 1/2 inch so that I can pass my 1/4 inch wide elastic through. Now the length of my elastic is the circumference of her wrist, which is 7 inches. So I just measured 7 inches of my elastic, and now I'm just going to go ahead and pass it through that 1/2 inch channel that I created on the hem of my sleeve. So it's important that your channel is able to accommodate your elastic. So if you're using a 1 inch wide elastic, make sure that your channel is wide enough to accommodate the size of your elastic. Okay, so I just pass the elastic all the way through. You can do this with a safety pin or with a broomstick like I'm doing. Whatever you need to use, just pass the elastic through. And when you're done, make sure you pin the elastic at both ends so it doesn't fall back into the channel. Now I'm just folding it, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew the side of the sleeve with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I'm just taking out the pin, and then I'm going to go ahead and just tack the elastic in place. Okay, so make sure you tack it so it's secure, and like I said, so that it doesn't fall back into the channel. So do the same thing for both sides. Take out the pin and then just go ahead and just tack it. Okay, now I'm just folding it like I showed you. Just folding like I showed you earlier, and then I'm just going to go ahead and just join it at the side. Now before I join this, I'm just going to go ahead to just measure the armhole area. Okay, so when I measured the armhole of my dress, I found that I had about 10 inches. Okay, that's the armhole curve. So I'm just making sure that I have that same 10 inches on my sleeve, and then that point where I get the 10 inches, I'm just sewing that all the way down with about 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way down to the hem there. And then when I turn this to the right side, as you can see, we have our sleeve looking lovely. Now I'm just going to go ahead and just insert the sleeve into the dress. Now make sure that the seam of the sleeve the seam of the sleeve aligns with the side seam of the dress. Okay, very important. And then from that point, you want to go ahead and sew it all the way around. Make sure you're sewing this with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, all the way to the end. And this is what we have. Can you see how lovely our sleeve looks? I actually really love this fabric. This is a Duchess Satin fabric, by the way. Now moving on to the ruched part. So we want to go ahead and move our dress so we are focusing on the side seam. Now go ahead and weave the allowance for your side seam. After weaving it, sew the side seam right down with half inch. Okay, now because this ruching doesn't get all the way to the hem, you want to measure the point where you want your ruching to stop. So for me, that is 27 inches. Okay, so I'm just taking my elastic and I'm cutting the elastic at 27 inches length. So I'm making sure that the length of my elastic is 27 inches. Okay, now I'm going ahead, like I said, to just sew down the allowance. Okay, make sure that you're not catching any other thing, just sew the allowance down on the wrong side. Now make sure that the channel you create is half inch wide. Can you see? Half inch wide, so that your quarter inch wide elastic can pass through. Now from the top part there, I'm just marking half inch down and I'm creating a tiny hole on the allowance alone. Now this hole is not getting to the right side of this dress, okay? You don't want the hole to get to the right side. So just create a tiny hole, okay? Because that's where your elastic is going to come out from. Now from the bottom, I also created a tiny hole, okay? And it's 8 inches from the hem. Like I said, that is where I want my ruching to stop. Okay, now go ahead and just pass your elastic through that hole at the bottom all the way and bring it out of the hole at the top. Now I want to mention something. The original length of my skirt was 42 inches, and then minus the 28 inches of the elastic gave me 14 inches. Now that 14 inches minus the 8 inches at the bottom part before the hole gave me 6 inches. So that remaining 6 inches length of the skirt is going to be ruched up. Okay, so that is the small mathematics behind this ruching and behind the length you finally get at the end. So you want to decide what length you want to have at the end. So when I passed out the elastic through those holes, all I did now was just sew and tack the elastic in place so it doesn't fall right back into the channel. Okay, now this is what it looks like once we're done. Now I'm just going to go ahead and insert my label. This is the next day. So I'm just inserting my label, the Silem Couture. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is the finished look. I really love how this dress turned out and my clients really loved it as well. Can you see that the ruching didn't get all the way to the hem? Now if you want to learn how to make a skirt that the ruching gets all the way to the hem, I'm going to leave the link right here. So just click the video on the right and you're going to learn how to make the full ruched skirt.